Hi everybody, I'm Mairead Smialek and I'm here with Allen Parsons, and he is the director of the Longboat Key Planning, Zoning and Building Department. And we are here today to talk about the FEMA 50% rule. Thank you so much for joining us.
Yeah, no, my pleasure.
In a nutshell, what's the FEMA 50% rule?
FEMA 50% rule is a requirement that structures that are not elevated above that FEMA flood elevation requirement, if they're damaged more than 50% of the structure's assessed value, not the structure and the land, but just the structure.
Mm-hmm.
If structures
Important distinction.
Yep.
Yep.
If they're damaged more than 50% of that, or there are improvements related to damage more than 50% of the structure's value, then the entirety of the structure is required to be elevated, at least the habitable portion, above that FEMA flood elevation requirement.
So what do you think are the common misconceptions, like is a roof covered in FEMA? Because that comes up a lot in my conversations with clients. Like, what are people are misinformed about, I should say?
I've gone through, something that's devastating. I'm dealing with trying to get my place repaired so I can get back into it.
Yeah.
And then come to find out that, oh, my house is below the FEMA flood elevation requirement. Anything that I do is going to kind of total up, where if I cross over this 50% threshold, I'm no longer just repairing my house. I'm either having to do something like elevate it, like lift the house up, or I'm thinking about having to tear this down and build something new. So
it's a huge financial burden.
Gigantic.
Yeah.
So I think what I've encountered is just sort of lack of awareness of, I didn't know that my house was below the FEMA flood elevation. I didn't know that there were these FEMA requirements.
Yeah.
I didn't know that I would have to provide copies of contracts and what the labor costs are and all of those kinds of things.
Can people do improvements in stages? Like that, I've heard that, and I actually don't know the answer to that. And so I always say contact the town, but can you do that?
I think that there are repairs that are needed to restore a place back to being habitable again.
Okay.
Those really have to be done all in one shot. But let's say that you were making some repairs and then you wanted to take the opportunity to add on, some additional square footage to your house. Well, if that additional square footage is going to kick it over the 50% value, then that could be something that could be staged to be done later.
Got it. What do you think is the best resource for people to find out information about this? If they're just starting out, like what's a great place for them to start?
FEMA has great resources on what flood zone you're in, what am I required to do, grant funding in case they are looking for assistance from damage that they've had. So FEMA is a great resource. Within the Town of Longboat Key, we have some good resources. A great resource that we have that has site-specific property information on what's the FEMA flood zone that I'm in, how high do I have to elevate it. If there's an elevation certificate for the property that we happen to have, that elevation certificate is available on that site.
Speaking of that, a lot of people don't know what that is. What is an elevation certificate?
It's something that's done by a surveyor that will put in on that certificate what the elevation is of the habitable portion of your structure. And that's the key thing. So you can have non-habitable portions of structures like the garage or an entryway, just not livable space below the FEMA flood elevation requirement. But the habitable portion on that elevation certificate, if you have to be, say, 9 feet above sea level, that elevation certificate will tell you that the habitable portion is at 9 feet or 10 feet or something above that or below it.
Yeah.
If you're below it, then that's where the FEMA 50%
really kicks in.
Yeah, kicks in. Yep.
The flood maps changed recently. What are your thoughts on why they changed and why they proposed the new flood maps? I know that I think Manatee was earlier than Sarasota. Is that correct?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah. Town of Longboat Key is split about geographically in half.
Yeah.
Northern half of the town is in Manatee County. Southern half is in Sarasota County.
Yep.
The FEMA flood maps, which cover the entire U.S., they get updated every so often. You're right that Manatee counties were updated in 2021. Sarasota's were in 2024.
Yeah, that sounds right.
And yes, I mean, surprisingly enough, both of the sides of the town had FEMA flood elevation differences of about 2 feet lower. So you know, if you were previously considered to be in that 100-year floodplain at, say, 10 feet, now under these new maps, the 100-year floodplain would say that it's about 8 feet.
Yeah.
Why? That's a good question. It was surprising to
me too.
Us here in the town, and I'm sure to many.
Yeah.
But the explanation is from FEMA that does these maps that, you know, they have better information to be able to determine what these 100-year floodplain elevation requirements are, and so I'm guessing that the better information had them overestimating by 2 feet from the previous maps.
Yeah.
But it doesn't make sense, I will say that.
Yeah, and I tend to be conservative, so I think if I were building from scratch, I would just build higher, just because I'd want to make sure that if they change in the future that I was covered from an insurance perspective and just from, you know, protecting my property. Which leads us to our last question. I mean, how did the properties with, you know, these pretty significant storms do that were elevated? You know, how do they do compared to properties that are at original elevation? If someone's out there watching thinking, should I redo what I have if I have the resources, or should I start from scratch and build higher? What's your general thought on that?
Yeah, I would say in almost all cases, I'm not aware of any structures that were meeting the current FEMA flood elevation requirements, meeting the current Florida building code requirements, having damage to the habitable portions.
Yeah.
Now, a lot of people had damage to, you know, a garage that might be below that or partially below that. We had a lot of vehicles out here were damaged where people left them in their garages. Yeah. But the habitable portions and the structures themselves did very, very well. So, and I've seen that in a number of different hurricanes, not just the ones that you know, were immediately here.
Yeah.
The structures that are built above that FEMA flood elevation requirement do very, very well.
Well,
So,
thank you very much. We
yeah,
appreciate
yeah.
your time. This was very helpful and informative to our viewers, because I think there's a lot of misconceptions out there, and we'll provide your contact details below. So if anyone has any additional questions about the FEMA 50% rule, they can certainly inquire with him. Thank you again for watching our video, and I'll catch you on the next one.